Hey everybody, and welcome back to Beginner's Fab. My name is Eric McGrew, and today we are going to be discussing a little bit about what my next process of this is for this project. Now, as you can see, and as I mentioned in the other video, this here is not placed in place exactly. It's just mocked up in an approximate position of how it will be. What I've noticed, of course, is that the bolt's too long. It hits against the gas tank, so it doesn't allow it to be centered like I want it to be. And also, these shackles aren't the shackles I'm actually going to use. These are the shackles that I'm using as a template, because the shackles that I'm going to use are actually 3/8, and there is some issues drilling holes in them and a few other things, but I'm not going to get into all that right at this moment. Now, one thing that I do need to make mention, though, is that with this now, what I've got to do is take it off the truck, out of, being placed where it is for mock-up. And I've got to go ahead and weld up what I know is good, which is basically all of it. I've got to refine this just a little bit. I've got to weld up the pivot mount bracket, and also on top of that, I've got to cut down this bolt here a little bit so that it'll not hit the gas tank. That way I can align it the way that I want it to. And then I've got to close in these a little bit too, just so I don't get so much trash up inside there. And that's what I'll be doing now. After that, though, I will actually be making the second one of these. And unfortunately, I remembered that for my pivot mount bracket, I don't have the hole saw that I need, so I'm going to have to wait to make that one until maybe later this weekend. It's a little frustrating, but it's just how it is. So that's what I'll be doing now, and I've also got a bit of welding to do on all of this stuff as well, and I can, make it all work out the way that I need to. So hopefully, if all this goes well, I should be pretty well on my way to getting this one ready to mount fully, and if I have time, I'll start working on some of the spring perches for the axles for the what's it called here? The leaf springs. Once again, I just have the long spring for mock-up reasons. It's easier. When I mount it to the axle, I'll just have one spring of the pack on there too. I can flex it, I can move it, I can do all that stuff, see how it works. And then once I've gotten it all refined into position and all that kind of stuff, at that moment, I will go back and I will weld everything up finally, and I will put the rest of the spring packs on here. And then I'll start testing height and all that kind of stuff to see how it sits and how it works. So that's what we got for the moment, and we'll go from there, I guess. So as I had mentioned before, one of the things that my plan for today with this episode really was to finish up one side of the leaf springs. If I could get it at least tacked on to the chassis, and I'm still working on that. But another part of it was to kind of show you guys what it was that I was doing to make the components, the different brackets and all that kind of stuff. Now, I haven't been so good about actually filming me like cutting and grinding and that kind of stuff for two reasons. One, I don't want to ruin my cameras because, well, I don't make enough money right now to replace my cameras, and one of them is my phone. Two, because a lot of this stuff is really, really basic. If you look up like how to make tabs and that kind of stuff, the principles are the same, or the concepts are the same. The shapes change slightly, but you just cut the hole for the bolt. Then you make sure you draw your border out that you want, 3/8, 5/8, whatever it is that you want. Then you cut the shape out. Then you take another plate of metal with extra metal around it, make your hole, put the two together, draw it out so that it's the exact shape as the other one, cut it, and then clamp them together with some kind of vise, and then grind them down so that they're equal. That's the idea on all my tabs. Now, I'll show you a couple of things that I've done and how I'm doing it with what I need for the leaf springs. For instance, one of the things that I did, and you probably won't have to do it this way, it'll probably be slightly different, just because the way that I had to buy my I'm trying to get the sun out of my eyes. That's why I have you up in the air like that. One of the reasons that I had to do this a little bit different than probably you will have to is because I can't buy DOM material here. Now, That being said, you don't have to buy DOM material in the States either, but I do suggest that it's just a better material. And if you're going to spend this much effort, spend the few dollars more, buy the DOM material, and make yourself a good set of shackle brackets, and and do it good. That's my suggestion, at least. So what I have here, though, is that if you remember, when I bought the springs, one of them had a bad eyelet in it. So I had to have I want to say it was the pivot eyelet remade because it was just really, really bad. So when I was at the leaf spring fabrication shop, I asked the guy to make me 2 eyelets that fit the bushings for leaf springs, and he did so. Came on a piece of flat bar. It was an eyelet on each end. I cut off the center. I used the center for other aspects of this build, and that's what I'm going to show you right now. So instead of having dome tubing, I'm actually using eyelets that were actually bent, rolled in steel at the leaf spring shop. And to make what I need for the shackle brackets that mount to the chassis, I've done the following. Okay, so first off, I took the eyelet, as you can see, and I welded it up. I welded up the portion of the eyelet. This is pretty ugly because I haven't taken the slag off of it yet. And I welded up the opening where they folded the metal right there, as you can see. Sorry, I got flies on me. And then I welded it to the base plate. There and there. And there. So I welded it on all 4 sides to make sure that this thing was stable on that plate. Now what I did was, I actually took this and I measured out the distance diameter-wise of the eyelet, and then I measured an inch out on each side from that eyelet to give me an idea of what I wanted. Then I went and I cut me some plate that was to fit like I wanted it there. Now this one I'll probably actually trim down a little bit more because I didn't mark them the same, and I cut that one a little too long. And then what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll weld the cord here, just as I did on the other one. I'll do that on both sides. Okay, so on this one here, I actually, as you can see, I've welded it up on the top up there. Welded it there as well. And I have these plates on the sides that I've used. Flip it up and pull this up like so. So as you can see, I have the plate welded up on the sides, on both sides, just to try to keep the water and trash and stuff out of the inside of this. Now, if you notice, this welding is a lot different than the welding that I've done on top and that kind of stuff. The reason for that is that this welding here, I did it all as a structural welding with 6011 welding rod for stick welders. And this here is 6013, which can, if done right, make a completely different looking weld, a much better weld. You can get 6011 that good if you're talented, and I'm not that talented. But you can also see that right here, I'm not that talented with the 6013 either. It always takes me a little bit to get back in the rhythm of 6013. It's a much more complex weld, I think. In the sense of getting it aesthetically strong, aesthetically good and strong. And on top of that, just remember that 6013, if you're doing stick welding, is not as strong typically as a 6011 is. So that's why structurally I use 6011, and then aesthetically, as these aren't really holding any of the force, I used 6013 there. Now, this will all get painted, it'll get all polished up a little bit, and then I'll put the bushings in it and mount it onto the chassis. Now I'm going to finish up making my other shackle mount, and then we'll go into what I did for the pivot mount bracket for the leaf springs. So my next step was to make the pivot bracket mounts. Well, really it was my first step to begin with, and I have not made the second one yet because I realized, well, I'm missing my, I wore out my 5/16, no, I wore out my 5/8, 5/8 hole saw, and so I can't make more holes right at the moment. But what I am going to do is show you what I did with the other mount that I made. Now, This is also welded together with 6011 green point, I think it is, or blue point, I can't remember, electrodes. It's kind of messy, and I'm using 3/32 because this is not going to need 1/8 inch rod for sure, but at the same time I am really welding them up so that they'll be strong. Now, if you notice here, I have welded the bracket that I made, the tab, to a flat plate here, and then I welded it along the outside. Now, first off, I tacked on each corner, and then I made a tack on the inside right there. Then I went back and welded up the whole outside and then the whole inside, letting it cool in between. And I did that on both sides. You can see here, because of the angle and how I was welding with this, it turned out a little bit prettier than the other one that I showed you earlier. Plus, I didn't grind it down. I'm going to leave it like it is and polish it off a little bit with some wire brush, and then I'll paint it up and it should be good. But I did weld it on the inside and outside. Now, I know some people are going to say, what did you do? The bottom plate is 3/8 and the brackets are actually 1/4. And that's true, they are. It's because I was having issues perforating the 3/8 the other day, and in frustration I just went over to the 1/4 inch material. But what I'm going to do on the back is I'm going to actually weld a plate there that'll give it some support. And honestly, I can't imagine that this is going to have any issues with the welding and everything I've done. Now, I will make the other one the same just so that they match, and I'll go from there. So it's a pretty simple design. Like I said, this piece here, sorry for the movement there. This piece here will go in like so, but a little bit further down, and I will weld it in like that, and then that'll give it reinforcement as well.